Welcome back to One Piece Explained. Chapter 1144 sets our heroes on a crash course with the current antagonists of this arc, and with it, we get some very interesting new revelations between the possibility of Elbaf being the remnants of the ancient kingdom, Gunko being a fan of the Soul King Brook, and much more. So let's get right into it. We resume the Ogre Child Yamato's Golden Harvest Surrogate Pilgrimage cover story with our 29th entry in the aftermath of Yamato defeating Who's Who and his forces. It seems there was quite a battle, as the base itself has been thoroughly destroyed, and you can see several of the crew knocked out and beat up, with two of the humans in the foreground, alongside the cheetah or leopard mink, and what may be the hair of the lion smile user in the back behind Tama. Speaking of, she's shown here freeing the carpenter Minato, who we had learned had gone missing almost 20 chapters ago. We had theorized that Who's Who had taken him hostage, likely to construct this base modeled in his image. We also learned a while back that some of the Soba shop workers had disappeared as well, and we see them thanking Yamato here for freeing them. The two women on the left were the same ones that we saw a few chapters ago when Who's Who was reintroduced into the story. Yamato has also reclaimed Yasue's sword, but it's still not exactly clear which one of Who's Who's henchmen it was that took it in the first place. We know that it could not have been Hold'em since he arrived at the base alongside Yamato's group, so I wonder if there's another character at play here that we haven't yet seen in this cover story just yet. And on a similar note, we still don't know who that silhouette that tried to abduct the girl in Curry belonged to. I have to wonder if these will ever get addressed outright, or will be just left to our imaginations as unnamed members of Who's Who's gang. We're about to approach the 30th entry in this cover story, which is around when these start to get really good, so I'm looking forward to what comes next. I'm sure there will be a bit more in the aftermath of this battle here between checking in on page 1 and Ulti, and maybe even seeing Who's Who once more. Who knows, maybe we'll even get to see his true face under the mask. We still have yet to meet the new daimyo of Udon, who I theorize to be Raizo since he was born there, plus there's still 2 regions left to cover with Hakumai and Ringo, and I can't imagine that Who's Who's little operation will be the main source of conflict in this cover story, so who knows what may come next. Will we see the return of Big Mom and Kaido, or will this be where Blackbeard makes his move? We'll just have to find out, but with that said, let's get into chapter 1144, A Time for Warriors. After we last saw Frankie taking in thousands of years of world history through the ancient mural, we get the continuation of the tour around the Jewel Tree Atom as Ripley takes him to a strange decrepit building. She figures that a cyborg like Frankie would take some interest in this place given its scientific nature, and what a sight this is, as it is nothing like what we've seen in the series before. Though in a way, you could argue that it resembles the Tree of Knowledge from Ohara, since it looks like this laboratory or whatever it is has been carved into a tree. There are overgrown vines, moss, and grass everywhere, as well as these strange bulbs that for some reason just remind me of the Yaruki-Man mangroves at Sabaody. It seems this place has also been conveniently found by Lilith and Bonnie. Last time we saw them was back at the Owl Library, just before the group split up, with the two of them mentioning how they needed to go ask for permission to settle down in Elbaf. It wasn't made clear just what exactly this entailed, and it's not mentioned in this chapter if they actually got around to doing that just yet, since they admit that they ended up here by accident after getting lost. At this point, I'm wondering if they needed to ask permission from the other elders of the village that we've been hearing about across the last several chapters. Lilith throws out that this place may be at least 3,000 years old, which Frankie finds to be unbelievable, and for good reason, as we don't actually have too much information on any recorded history beyond the Void Century. The oldest data point we have is actually the Tree of Knowledge, which was said to have been around for 5,000 years, and after that is the Palace of Alubarna, which was said to have represented 4,000 years of history. From there, the next thing we can estimate is the start of the Age of Cayenne, also referred to as the Sea Circle Calendar, as disclosed to us when Nami read Nolan's logbook, which would be around 1,500 years ago, and even Zunatia, one of the oldest living beings alive, is only 1,000 or so years old. Coupled with what we learned from the Harley and the Ancient Mural, the existence of structures that predate even the Void Century itself is quite fascinating. What's more is the realization that if this lab is that old, then it follows that Elbaf must be as well. And that brings me back to an old theory that I've spoken of on the channel before, the possibility that the name of the ancient kingdom is Elbaf. It's been a little while, so let's get into this idea once again. First and foremost, there must be some reason why the name of the kingdom cannot be disclosed, both for us as readers and the people in the world of One Piece. For the audience, the name being a secret just adds to its mystique and builds suspense over these years. However, for the people that inhabit the world in which the story takes place, the name must be significant enough for it to be covered up. If it were something novel that nobody had heard of before, then concealing its true name is no more significant than hiding its existence to begin with. The 5 elders entertained Clover's hypothesis about the kingdom to the point of allowing the world government agents present to learn about it, but for some reason, they had enough when Clover was about to disclose the name. If something so simple has that much power over the present, then it suggests to me that the name must be something the people of the world are already familiar with to some extent. But still, why Elbaf? Well, in the English translation by Viz, Clover describes the ancient kingdom as immense. One could take this to simply mean that the kingdom was vast or had great influence, but I think the intended interpretation may have been big, or more specifically, giant. This is actually true in the original language with the Japanese text, as it is referred to as Kyodai no Okoku, with Okoku meaning kingdom and Kyodai meaning something like huge or gigantic. In fact, the Kyo is the same Kyo found in the Japanese word for giant, Kyojin. Now that was the initial basis for this idea, and we only got more as we progressed further into the series. In the previous arc, we learned that the ancient kingdom apparently had incredibly advanced technology, with the giant robot Emmet being implied to have been their creation. His appearance is quite interesting, and you'll note how similar he looks to the giants, or perhaps more specifically, the ancient giants, since we learned that the horns are a byproduct of their lineage. It makes you wonder why the ancient kingdom would create a robot with this design if there was not any significance to them. Even in our real world, many people's prototypical idea of what a robot looks like is a mechanical being made in our own image, with human-like features and appendages, so it would follow that the people of the ancient kingdom may have done the same. I should also note that we know Joy Boy was from, or at the very least aligned with, the ancient kingdom, and from what we can tell, he does not necessarily appear to be giant. However, scaling is not always consistent or clear in One Piece, and so who knows, perhaps Joy Boy is the size of a giant and Emmet is much larger. I'm sure everyone can empathize with the desire to make giant robots, even if they are giants themselves. Not only this, but earlier in this arc, when we first learned about the Svar, Lilith mentions how the climate on Elbaf is perfect for various sorts of sciences, including island clouds, sea clouds, bubbles, rainbows, and hovering. Back in that chapter breakdown, I talked about how contrived it was that most of Vegapunk's technologies and the strange phenomena that we've seen around the world could actually be used on this one island. But if you consider the idea that the island is actually the remnants of a long-lost kingdom with futuristic technology and terraforming capabilities, then its plot convenience feels a lot less forced. Of course, in theory, the ancient kingdom does not exist in the present day, but that's not to say there are no remnants. After all, the people who hold the name D still exist and are highly speculated to have a connection that goes back to that kingdom. The kingdom and its people being wiped out, only to be rebuilt as a quote-unquote new nation, would align very closely with what we learned about the Jewel Tree Atom way back after the events of Enies Lobby. It would also add a bit more context to Workery's line to Dorian Brogy about how the world government has a lot to settle with their race. It makes a lot of sense that it would take the combined efforts of 20 kingdoms to stand a chance against the nation of giants. Throughout the series, we've learned plenty about the world government's attempts at acquiring the might of the giants, whether that be through twisted experiments in human gigantification, or orchestrated stunts to gain soft power inside a giant nation with Mother Carmel. And all of these failed attempts over the years has brought us to the present day, where the Holy Knights have come to make Elbaf submit to the world government one way or another. But enough about that fun theory, as there's still a bunch to talk about in this chapter. Lilith mentions that she'll take up base here, which is perfect, as she had mentioned earlier in the arc that she would need to construct a laboratory to bring the Vegapunk clone back online and to help Kuma, who as far as we know is still on the Great Eric somewhere, unless he was moved off screen. Frankie goes to check out the lab, when suddenly the Storm Cloud Sleeptid appears before them. In the previous breakdown, I pointed out how it seemed to still have the same 4 bolts of lightning as it did in its initial depiction, almost as if using them as legs to move around, and that's kind of what looks like is happening here, though you can see 2 other bolts coming out from its backside. Elsewhere, the jogger that swatted away the firefighting Svar in the previous chapter has made its way to the western village with sword drawn, and the villagers scramble trying to defend against it when they realize that Dory and Brogy are nowhere to be found, apparently having been stuck in the bathroom after drinking so much. Both the Straw Hats and Colin offer their help and are turned down, which is fair all things considered. These Sleeptids are larger than the giants themselves, so the Straw Hats are microscopic in comparison. With all of these unusual things going on, Nami decides to let Chief Jarl know about the guards that were attacked in the castle, though it's not made explicit if she also told him about what the Straw Hats were doing there in the first place. I don't think he'd be so keen to hear that they were there to find the key to Loki's chains. Now, as the guards explain what happened to them and report on the Shanks lookalike, they refer to Gunko's arrow powers as a strange ability, to which Jinbei chimes in with the assertion that it was probably a devil fruit. Now, this notion of mysterious powers being the work of devil fruits is just commonplace to us as readers, but it's interesting to me that it's made out to be a point here, as if the giants needed to be informed of what devil fruits were. This further brings into question just how much the average Elbaf giant knows. Just earlier in this arc, we saw some of the villagers express curiosity over Jinbei, who's a fishman, and learned that most giants from Elbaf do not ever really leave to see the outside world. This may also extend to their layman understanding of devil fruits if they have one at all. We've seen across the series that various isolated people refer to devil fruit powers as different things, such as curses, magic, sorcery, or even ninjutsu, and when Mother Carmel used her soul fruit powers to quell the raging fire, the villagers thought of it as a miracle and were swayed into believing that it was just an act of the sun god. So it could be that the people of Elbaf just don't have a specific understanding of devil fruits, as after all, giants with devil fruits are quite rare. This wouldn't necessarily apply to those who have experienced the outside world, however, as the Giant Warrior Pirates and the new Giant Warrior Pirates both have expressed the knowledge of devil fruits in one way or another, with Hyrule seeking out the Flame fruit, where he had a particular line that once again highlights how rare of a sight it would be if he acquired the fruit. And the Giant Warrior Pirates also recently spoke of devil fruits with regard to the legendary fruit that was passed down along the royal family, showing they have some understanding of the concept. But once again, it's not entirely clear if the average citizen is privy to such a thing, as the villagers never brought it up as the reason for Loki's alleged murder of Harold. Plus, we know the commoners were not allowed in the royal castle, suggesting a certain level of secrecy that was going on with the affairs of the royal family, so it's possible that the citizens were not even aware the legendary fruit was a thing in the first place. Brook astutely asserts that there must be more than two enemies if things have gotten this bad, and the Straw Hats begin to rally for action, with Nami expressing frustration with these people that are trying to take helpless children, a sentiment that we've seen from her throughout the New World. Jarl rejects this help, however, and notes that them being guests means they should be taken to safety and not out on the front lines. At face value, this is quite reasonable, however, Jarl should know just how capable the Straw Hats are at this point as an Emperor's crew. This might not be anything more than Jarl trying to be respectful to their esteemed guests, but given some of the suspicions surrounding Jarl's motives in this arc, I wonder if he may be trying to keep them out of the picture. It's not clear where exactly his allegiances lie, just that they seem to sort of run perpendicular to Loki, who we are starting to see as a potentially innocent person. It would be something if Jarl ends up as an asset to the world government, just as we have speculated Harold to be. Now, with both the Straw Hats and Colin being set aside and told not to intervene, it only makes sense that they find an alliance among themselves to take action. Colin has been eager to set out to sea as a pirate ever since his introduction in the prior arc, and with the Straw Hats wanting to accompany him, he gets to play out his dream of being a pirate with a crew. He dubs himself the captain of the Colin Pirates, which of course just echoes Usopp's days of playing a pirate as the captain of the Usopp Pirates, and the gag of the oversized bag that is cumbersome and unmanageable is played up here once again, just as it was with Usopp when he decided to set out to sea as a pirate. We then check back in with the Holy Knights having just finished the meal of their dreams and learn that Gunko enjoys listening to music after her meals. Around her ears is a pair of tone dial headphones. We were first introduced to the concept of tone dials back in the Skypiea arc, where they were simply shells that could record and store sounds to be played back at a later time. We would see them once again during the Thriller Bark arc, but this time on the Blue Sea, and also several decades ago, as we learn that Brook recorded the final ensemble song of the Rumbar Pirates on a tone dial. In the Return to Shabati arc, we would learn that Brook had become a famous rock star over the time skip and had an incredible number of TD sales, tone dial for short. It would be explained a bit later in the Volume 64 SBS that tone dial technology had become iterated upon and popularized over the last 2 years, allowing people to use them via speakers or headphones, which is what we see here with Gunko. Seeing this technology appear once again in the main story is quite exciting, and with a member of the Holy Knights no less, but what's even more unbelievable is the song that she enjoys the most is none other than New World. This is not to be confused with New Genesis, a song by Uta from Film Red, though that would have been pretty interesting as well. But anyways, you may recognize this song as belonging to the great Soul King Brook. This is the last song that Brook played at his farewell concert on Shabandi, and while its lyrics were never disclosed in the manga, we did get a full rendition of it in the anime. I don't know that I can actually play the song here in this video, given how strict copyright laws around music can be, so we'll just have to do with the English translation of the lyrics on screen. While this song is generally motivational and is about embarking on a new journey for a better tomorrow, there are a few lines throughout that are extremely interesting within the context of this being Gunko's favorite song. First and foremost, this initial section certainly nods at Luffy, who's of course the current user of the Nika fruit, and there is a curious bit of irony here, considering that Gunko had expressed a few chapters ago that her biggest fear was Nika. We sure are getting a lot of specific characterization for her, like her fears and her hobbies, things that we have not gotten yet for any of the other Holy Knights. I've spoken at length in prior breakdowns about how she's been the odd one out among the group, with not getting a World Noble status, a saint title, or even a family name, not to mention her rather distinct clothing that is worlds apart from the regal military outfits worn by her comrades, and there may be good reason for this that we'll talk about shortly. We also get some lines talking about dreams, which of course is just a general recurring theme in a series like One Piece, but it is quite the coincidence that we are dealing with a Devil Fruit user who can make dreams come to life to engage in battle with. There's also a line that talks about your friends being villains, and from Brook's perspective, this is of course clearly playing into the idea that they are pirates and are on the wrong side of the law, but this line may resonate specifically with Gunko, who from a narrative perspective is allied with villains to our protagonists. Much of the song also deals with the idea that change is coming to the world, which Summers actually pokes fun at Gunko for, jokingly asking if she has an issue with the one that we live in today. The status quo of the world is of course beneficial for people like the Celestial Dragons, but as we've talked about before, we have yet to get any explicit confirmation that Gunko herself has the same privileges and rights that they do. This also plays interestingly at odds with her fear of Nika, who historically is believed to have been an agent of change for this world. A bit later on, we also get some classic Brook-isms, where he asks to see the listener's panties, a classic and somewhat distasteful gag that we've seen from him throughout the series. But it's this line in particular that may have the greatest or most explicit connection to Gunko as a character, given how she dresses. A hot topic among the fandom, when her full design was revealed several chapters ago, was her lack of pants, but more explicitly, her being portrayed in only her underwear. Many fans took issue with this and saw this as another instance of Oda being unbearable with his fan service, which felt like it had reached a new level in the prior arc with the egghead outfits and the numerous panels featuring women's butts. I totally agree with these criticisms as a whole, though I must admit I did find something of interest or value with the first present-day Holy Knight's outfit being a complete subversion of expectations. Given what we saw back in the God Valley flashback, there was some reason to believe that we would be getting more warriors who took themselves so seriously, dressed in regal ornamentation, so it was a bit of a relief when we saw that one of them was just a girl in this strange outfit. This subversion continued with the introduction of Summers and Killingham, an old confused man in his undergarments, and a goofy long-necked creature with a trident, though of course they too had their military outfits. Whatever your stance may be on Gunko's depiction, it is rather interesting that it has the potential to be a strange plot point where she dresses like this for the sole purpose of expressing her being a fan of Brook, and I say that with the full understanding that predicating this sort of plot beat on a woman being presented in her underwear does not do anything to alleviate how distasteful or misogynistic something like this is in the first place, but I'm excited to see how this whole thing shakes out, especially knowing that Gunko is aware of the Straw Hats being on Elbaf. She must be aware that Brook is a part of the crew by this point, so I have to wonder if she'll end up straying from her mission in some way. Whether that is a full-on betrayal of the Holy Knights in service of the Straw Hats' victory, or something as simple as being distracted by her affinity for Brook and being overtaken by her enemies through that. This panty line in the song is followed by another Brook-ism, referring to his gag where he leans against the wall head first at 45 degrees, when how 40 degrees is a bit too difficult. The last few lines are also of some interest with respect to Elbaf. We've yet to see the uppermost layer of the tree up close, with some speculation suggesting that this may be where we get some connection to space itself, what with it being referred to as the astral world in the English translation, and the line about crossing over the rainbow feels very relevant here, with the newly established technology of the painters allowing this to be a reality. There are a ton of really cool things that potentially come from this connection between Brook and Gunko, and I can't wait to see where exactly Oda takes it. Back over with the abducted children, Saul tries to stop their movement by blocking their path with shields. However, all this does is push the children into each other and their invisible thorns. We get the names of a few more children here, learning that the kid with the horns and goggles behind Gilva is named Scotty. We had first seen him back when the Water School was first introduced. Saul tries to get a hold of the children one by one from the back of the line and shows off some of his lassoing skills, which plays into his cowboy hat that he's always worn. I wonder if this actually speaks to something about the culture of the Giants where he's from. This child was also first seen back alongside Scotty, playing in the shore outside of the Walrus School, and we learned that his name is Bjorn. This now makes the second Elbaf giant to have this name, as we learned that one of the giant warrior pirates that defended against Mars's attack was named Bjorn as well. In the previous breakdown, I noted how Robin had some experience with dealing with sleepwalkers from her bout against Hakuba, and now I'm starting to wonder if we'll get some more parallels to her time in Dressrosa should she use her devil fruit powers to protect the children from the thorns, just as she protected Rebecca from the spiked iron balls that were utilized by Diamante's death and chambray technique. There is something quite fitting with the flower fruit clashing with the thorn fruit, and I'm always excited to see Robin get a fight. Just as Saul thinks he's beginning to get the situation under control, the Fenrir Sleeptid appears, making things more difficult, just as other creatures are appearing all around. Back over at the Western Village, the Giants have finally managed to take down the Draugr from earlier, only to be met with the Nidhogger Sleeptid. In the previous chapter, I was wondering if these creatures actually had their own specific power sets, or if they were just physical challenges for our heroes to overcome, but as we see here with the Nidhogger, he has some sort of lightning breath, so I have to wonder if the other Sleeptids like Nika or Loki will have special unique abilities as well. The ghost with the hat also appears beside him, which is interesting as we saw it at the Walrus School in the last chapter. I guess it decided to go elsewhere between then and now, and as the villagers start to get overwhelmed, we are shown a familiar sight with Dory and Brogy readying their weapons, the Bruiser Axe and the Terry Sword respectively, bringing back a fan favorite technique, Hakoku Sovereignty. We first saw this used against the giant goldfish dubbed the Island Eater back toward the tail end of the Little Garden arc, and it was seen once again over 1,000 chapters later in the Egghead arc when the two giant pirate captains used it to destroy the kid pirates and their ship, the Victoria Punk. This technique is effectively a compressed air blast, and it shoots right through the bodies of the ghost and the Nidhogger, and earlier we saw the Jormungandr Sleeptid get taken out by physical attacks, so something like this is sure to be enough. Interestingly, we also see what looks to be another giant-looking Sleeptid in front of them, also reacting in pain, though he does not seem to have taken the brunt of the impact. The beard and the teeth are reminiscent of the Loki Sleeptid that we saw, but there are some notable differences with the horns on the helmet, the lack of weapons in its hands, and the actual hands themselves, as the Loki Sleeptid had these mitts, whereas the Sleeptid we see here has individual fingers in its gloves, so we'll have to see what becomes of this. In either case, we learned Dory and Brogy just needed time to get rid of the booze in their bellies to sober up, and have arrived with all of the giant warrior pirates alongside them in the Great Eric, now modified into a spar using the clouds. You can see some familiar faces among the crew, and I love that Oda is still consistent with the wear and tear done to the ship from its time on Egghead, with all of these scratches and scorches around the boat, and the figurehead still being patched up. Alongside them is Gaban, who had left the castle ahead of the Straw Hats, and I'm glad to see him come back into the story so soon. We're really gearing up for the full-on conflict here, and we're not even 20 chapters into the arc. I'm excited to see where this goes next, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on the chapter down in the comments. And as always, you can find all of my weekly manga breakdowns in the playlist in the description, and if you made it this far into the video, thank you so much for watching, stay safe, and I hope to see you in the next one.